This week on Brian Ross Investigates, dangerous setbacks in the fight against COVID-19, a powerful new strain of the virus, and deadly delays in the long-awaited vaccinations. How did this happen? We're joined by the former acting Surgeon General, Dr. Boris Lushniak, to get some answers. Plus, will this be the year of reckoning for a powerful church leader accused of the rape and sex trafficking of young girls in his worldwide congregation? The woman who's accused of helping groom his victims after first being a victim herself now wants the world to know what really happens behind the altar and in the secret tunnels and rooms of the Light of the World Church.
She was 8 years old when she was first raped by Samuel, who is the current apostle's father, the former apostle.
And this week's winners and losers in the media, including the reporter who first revealed the stunning tape of the president's phone call asking Georgia officials to throw the election his way.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
From the Law&Crime Trial Network, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our viewers on Facebook Live. I'm Brian Ross, joined tonight, as always, by my colleague Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, it's a new year, a year which could be a year of reckoning for yet another powerful man accused of abusing young women under his authority and control. He calls himself the Apostle. Aidan Joaquin Garcia leads the Light of the World Church, which claims to have 5 million members in the United States and in dozens of countries around the world. His trial in California could begin in the next few months, but tonight we're learning there may be more charges coming against him. Rhonda?
That's right, Brian. On top of the criminal charges he faces in California state court, Aidan Joaquin Garcia and his Light of the World Church are also under investigation by federal authorities in Mexico and the United States, the Law&Crime Network has learned, looking into additional allegations of human trafficking and accusations of improper use of church money related to the apostle's financial lifestyle.
And Rhonda, his trial in California will likely include the testimony against him by one of his former handmaidens, Alondra Ocampo. She has pleaded guilty to a number of charges in a plea deal, and now she wants the world to know, although she can't yet talk publicly, but what she knows about the apostle. We're joined now by Miss Ocampo's lawyer, Fred Figueroa. Mr. Figueroa, why did your client decide to plead guilty?
I think my client has actually always wanted to plead guilty, and she's always wanted to basically expose the church and the Garcias for their true intentions. But there have been certain obstacles that have prevented that from taking place up until very recently. So, she's being accused, or she was being accused of dozens of felony sex charges. And so one can't just say, I plead guilty to all of it. Some of the charges were true, some of the charges weren't true. So it took some time to sift through and negotiate what she could plead guilty to, what she couldn't plead guilty to. If she had just pled guilty to everything at the outset, she'd be facing over 60 years in state prison.
You say that she wants to expose the true intentions of the apostle. What were they?
Well, some people believe that this is a church, and maybe a small part of it is engaged in this sort of rampant sexual abuse and pedophilia. But there may be more sinister intentions here. I think that there's been generations of pedophilia that have existed within this church, from the founder all the way down to its current version of the apostle, Aidan Joaquin. And maybe, this is really a pedophilia ring that's been disguised as a church. Or maybe it's a church, but these successive generations of apostles have discovered that it's also, they can engage in their sort of deviant sexual behaviors within the guise of the church. But for whichever it is, it's quite clear that 3 generations of Garcias have been engaging in rampant sexual abuse and pedophilia, and lately child pornography. And so, and yet they maintain this image of holiness and purity. And, so people are now starting to see them for what they are. And my client, Ms. Ocampo, wants to play a role in that. She wants to expose them. And actually, one of the reasons she's asked me to be her spokesperson is she wants to hopefully prevent these abuses from occurring to other women. It took her a long time to realize that what was being done to her was not holy, was not righteous, was not something mandated by God. And she's hoping that other women who are or were in the same situation she was in will see this, and hopefully will learn that this abuse isn't right.
How old was she when she was first abused?
She was 8 years old when she was first raped by Samuel, who is the current apostle's father, the former apostle.
8 years old.
Yes. It was in Guadalajara. It was during a time in which it was a religious ceremony of some kind, where people from all over the world would come and gather at the church buildings and grounds in Guadalajara. There are secret tunnels and rooms that are underneath the church buildings. So there are tunnels that connect the buildings, and there are secret rooms that are connected to these tunnels. And she was taken to one of these rooms, and there she was met by Nason Samuel, who at the time was the apostle. And he told her that she had been selected to be his bride.
And did that abuse, the sexual abuse, continue on a regular basis then, from age 8 on?
Yes. It continued. It was continuous, and she's being told by the voice of God that this is what is happening is a holy thing, and that this is her way to heaven, and that she cannot tell anyone. And so by that time, she was so conditioned into just believing whatever it was that was told to her, and accepting that what was being done to her was a blessing. This was her belief for many, many years, that what had been done to her wasn't actually abuse. Her perception was this was a blessing bestowed upon her by the apostle.
So she went from being abused to being a recruiter, in a way, then, of other young girls.
Yes, and I think this is, certainly something that is not uncommon. We see it in other types of trafficking cases where, children or women, young women who've been groomed or trafficked, then later on become, assisters or aiders and abettors of the people who do the trafficking. But yes, she was abused all her life, and then later on she was coerced into grooming. And when Nason Joaquin asked her to assist him, part of the reason she obeyed him is because she has been conditioned her entire life into obeying the apostle, just like every member of this church and every member of her family.
She's not prepared to testify against the apostle in his criminal trial?
If she is subpoenaed as a witness, and I believe she will be, but if she is subpoenaed as a witness by the government, then yes, she is prepared to testify to the truth as to all the things that happened to her and all the things that she had been forced to do.
And what will she admit as to her own culpability, her own wrongdoing?
Well, she has pled guilty to 4 felony counts. I should let you know that the terms of the plea bargain are under seal. So there are some things that I cannot reveal to you by order of court. But she did plead guilty to 4 crimes. 3 of those crimes involve basically having contact with a minor in order to facilitate a sex crime.
What's her frame of mind? Is she remorseful? Is she relieved? What is she thinking now as she sits waiting a time when she'll make a plea of her guilt and perhaps testify against the apostle, the man who she was taught to believe blindly?
It's one of relief, certainly. And there's a mix of emotions here, but relief is certainly one of them. And there's definitely remorse. It's complicated even in the remorse because she knows that she has done bad things. And part of it is it's what has been forced upon her. And part of it is what has been conditioned into her. But nevertheless, as a society, we still expect her to accept some responsibility for these things. And she herself is remorseful and sad that other women have gone through what she has gone through. And she wants to help.
All right, Fred Fiagaraja, the attorney for Orlando Ocampo, thank you so much for being here today with us and giving us this rare insight to what's happening inside that church and inside the life of the apostle. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Brian.
Coming up next, where are those vaccines? What can be done to speed up the snail-paced delivery of the much-needed COVID-19 vaccinations? When we come back, you're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Back now, with the daily death toll from COVID-19 setting grim records and the lag in the delivery of the vaccinations, the question is, what's going on? What's going to happen? We're joined by Dr. Boris Lushniak, the former acting Surgeon General of the United States and now head of the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland. Dr. Lushniak, where are those vaccinations? Where are the vaccines?
Well, right now, there's not a whole lot of them. They've been put into the places where they need to be stored appropriately. And as you know, the problem with these vaccines is that they need to be kept at rather cold temperatures. The big problem is that they are not getting where they need to get into, and that is into people, right? Into people's arms. And there's been a breakdown, I think, to a large extent in terms of settling the logistics of how do you move it, not only from the place of manufacturing, right? That's been done by transportation experts, but how do you move it from where they're being stored to appropriately give it to the high-risk groups that need to get it right now? And that's where the breakdown is occurring. And there needs to be a reconciling of whose responsibility is it to make sure it gets to the people.
We thought with Operation Warp Speed, all of that was being planned ahead, but now we see the president telling the governors it's up to them. And in New York, at least, the governor's blaming the mayor and the mayor's blaming the hospitals. The fingers are being pointed everywhere. How do we get out of this situation to get rid of this sluggish delivery of these much needed vaccinations?
Well, it's going to take leadership, and leadership at the national level, working directly with the state and local authorities on this. It can't be as simple as blaming people, saying, well, I gave it to you, right? Whether it's the feds telling the states, well, I gave it to you, do something about it. This is an undertaking, a massive undertaking that we as a society have not done, right? We've never done this type of vaccination effort. To try to achieve 80% of our population getting a vaccine has never been done in the United States. So, one, because we've not done this, there could be some growing pains as we're seeing right now. The key feature right now is leadership needs to be looking at what's working, what's not working, and how do you reconcile what's not working. And that starts at the federal level and is done with direct communication at the state and local level. Whose responsibility is to do what, when?
Dr. Lushniak, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
With the discovery of a new variation on the coronavirus in London, they're now under draconian lockdown that's supposed to extend through February. How much worse is it there, and is that likely to happen here?
It's uncertain. We, first of all, expect there to be mutations of the virus. This is what virus particles do, right? There's changes in their genetics. The disconcerting factor of what was found in England, but probably was already occurring in other places. We know we've seen this mutation in South Africa. We've seen it in a few states here in the United States. Is what? Is number one, that the initial data seem to prove that this new mutation is much more infectious. So the spread of this virus will be easier between person and person if, in fact, this mutation kind of takes over, if you will. So there is concern, and the reality is we have to monitor what's going on, both in England in terms of their methodologies, right? They're going more towards a lockdown scenario, which is keep people away from each other as much as possible to a higher level, and see what happens there. Here in the United States, we have, unfortunately, limited information because we're not doing a whole lot of testing of the virus for these genetic changes, right, for these mutations. So we don't know a lot in terms of what's going on in the United States. We got to get better at in terms of the science here and utilizing science to determine what mutations are out there. But yeah, this is a matter of concern, which does change the scenario to a large extent in terms of this being much more infectious. So it's difficult to predict how this is going to change things, but we have to be prepared for tougher methods.
And Dr. Lushniak, finally, what's the optimistic look? Where do you see the bright side here?
So the bright side, first of all, I got to tell you, in
one?
public health, we have to be optimists, right? People in public health who are pessimists get washed out early on in their careers, and I've had a good career. That being said, the optimism here is what? Is number one, that we're going to get our act together in terms of the logistics and getting this where it needs to be, as I mentioned, into people's arms. Number two, that production of the current emergency use authorized vaccines continues to increase. And in fact, that we have additional vaccines added to the weaponry against this virus. And when I look at optimism, as I tell my students at the University of Maryland, next semester is going to be a whole lot like last semester. Next summer, I believe, is going to be different than last summer, and it's going to be better. So that's my optimism, is we'll get our act together in terms of a public health response, in terms of vaccines getting there, as long as people still keep following the recommendations. And this is, again, a plea to your viewers here. Keep wearing the mask, stay away from others as much as possible, wash your hands. That doesn't go away with the vaccine.
Once again, Dr. Boris Lushniak with some wise words. Thank you so much again for joining us in this new year. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you much.
Coming up, this week's winners and losers in the media, including the reporter from the Washington Post who first revealed those Trump telephone call tapes. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Time now for this week's winners and losers in the media, the first of the year, as chosen by the editors of Mediaite. And we're joined by Aidan McLaughlin, who's the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, which, like the Law and Crime Trial Network, is part of the Dan Abrams media empire. Aidan, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us. Your first winner this year, Amy Gardner, a reporter for the Washington Post. Many of our viewers never heard of her, but she's been doing great work, including this weekend. She discovered and revealed for the first time the tapes of President Trump's phone call to Georgia officials.
What they did, and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense, and you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk. So look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Aidan, it was an astounding phone call and great work by the reporter for the Washington Post.
That's right. So what you were just listening to there is President Donald Trump basically berating Georgia election officials, including Brad Raffensperger, who is the Georgia Secretary of State, and his legal counsel. Now, basically, those officials have told the president repeatedly that Joe Biden won their state. The president called them up on Saturday and had this private call that Mark Meadows was on the line for, the chief of staff to the president. where for an hour he basically floated a series of false claims and conspiracy theories about the election, and ultimately said, all I need to do is find 11,000 and something votes, which is the amount of the margin that Joe Biden won the state by. So it was a pretty astonishing call. And Amy Gardner, who's a national political reporter for the Washington Post, ended up obtaining an audio of that call that was recorded by these Georgian election officials and released to her once President Donald Trump started speaking up publicly about the call and misrepresenting it. So it was a huge scoop for this Washington Post reporter, and she's been really good on the beat of sort of election conspiracy theories. So it's another feather in her cap.
Absolutely. Great work. As for a loser, Lou Dobbs of Fox Business, who refuses to accept any indication that there is no evidence of crimes committed. He wonders why there is no evidence. Here's what he had to say.
We're 8 weeks from the election, and we still don't have verifiable, tangible support for the crimes that everyone knows were committed. That is, defrauding other citizens who voted with fraudulent votes. We know that's the case in Nevada. We know it's the case in Pennsylvania and a number of other states, but we have had a devil of a time finding actual proof. Why?
And Aidan, we have just 15 seconds, but yet again, Lou Dobbs, a doubter, eh?
I mean, it should occur to him that the reason that there's no definitive proof to support any of these allegations that courts are accepting that the election was stolen should lead you to the indication that maybe the election wasn't stolen. It's shocking that he hasn't achieved that realization yet, while the rest of us have.
Absolutely. All right. Aidan McLaughlin, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us again for a new year of Brian Ross Investigates. And thanks to our great team for getting us on and off the air successfully.